Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the statements coming from the US government that if there is no progress on peace talks between Ukraine and Russia, then Trump will just walk away from this peace, which he claimed he'd sort out within 24 hours. But although Trump is still attempting to threaten Ukraine rather than the invaders, is this better news for Ukraine or for Russia? But first, for daily news and commentary, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So Marco Rubio, the Republican who used to stand up for Ukraine until he decided that his own personal advancement was more important, has said that the US will walk away from peace talks in a matter of days, he said, although he did then seem to allude that that meant weeks, if there's no rapid progress. Now, just to be clear, the framework of a deal, which the US are trying to present to Ukrainians, they're meeting with them in Paris this week, would require Europe more widely to ease sanctions on Russia, meaning that the US would also intend to ease sanctions. And although I'm not clear on where Trump's government stand on this exactly, but Russia also wants a deal which prevents Ukraine from building up its own forces or hosts European peacekeepers. So far, I've only heard that Trump doesn't want American forces there. I'm not sure he said anything about Ukrainian or European forces. But even the lifting of sanctions would, of course, have the practical effect of making it easier for Putin to rearm and reinvade much more quickly than would otherwise be the case. As such, neither the EU nor the UK are likely to comply. Even if Trump tries to force short-term harm on Ukraine for non-compliance, in the long term, governments around Europe now realise at long last that Putin intends to invade and occupy significant sovereign territory in Europe and destabilise the rest of the continent. This goes beyond just Ukraine. Putin wants to bring the whole of Europe down. Easing sanctions will be a complete non-starter. And because the US is putting no pressure on Russia, there are not likely to be any concessions coming from them. So, of course, what progress on peace can there be? Trump had threatened much tougher sanctions against Russia just a few weeks ago if they didn't start offering something to the talks themselves. Being honest, I think we were sceptical that Trump really meant it, and now we can see he had no intention. Zelensky has attempted to shift the dial a little bit by presenting evidence to the Americans of Chinese involvement in the war, but it seemed Trump backs Russia more than he hates China. The situation seems to be quite binary right now. Russia wants a peace deal only as a pause to rearm, and he wants to make sure that Ukraine can't do the same because he obviously doesn't have confidence he can rearm quicker than Europe. Ukraine and most of the rest of Europe need an agreement that doesn't take the form of sitting back and watching Putin just build up a new invasion force on Russia's western border. But if Trump genuinely did walk away, who would that benefit the most, Ukraine or Russia? There's a sense in which Trump's involvement has not been remotely helpful to Ukraine. And as for the military and humanitarian aid, I mean, that's due to end soon anyway. That doesn't seem to be tied to the talks. The aid being supplied by America right now is not from Trump. It's what was left over by the bill which Biden and the previous Congress passed. The current balance of power in the White House and on Capitol Hill will not be forthcoming with a new bill of support. Also, despite Rubio's involvement this week, remember who's leading these talks for America? Steve Witkoff. He's not a career diplomat. He's got no experience in peace negotiations. He's one of Trump's golfing buddies. The idea that a property developer was ever going to unlock an agreement which would satisfy both invader and invaded was something that a child would not believe. And if the USA walks away, then the only brokers in town are Europe. Like, nobody else seems to want a leadership role in the talks. So would that suit Russia to carry on with their invasion? Would the USA really ease sanctions if the fighting is continuing? America walking away doesn't mean they automatically lift sanctions on Russia. And if they did, how valuable is that really if those sanctions remain and even squeezed further by Europe? Just to put it into context. So if we go back to 2019, so this would be before COVID and also the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Remember, Russia was still occupying parts of Ukraine at the time. But it was before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, so before the major sanctions applied from 2022. Russia's exports to the USA amounted to about $22 billion. Their exports to the EU totaled $162 billion, over 7 times as much. So America easing sanctions on Russia is useful to them. But the European sanctions presumably hurt much more. Also, it occurs to me that some of that trade, even with America, will be made more difficult while the sanctions apply in Europe, because that trade will not be able to flow through Europe. Now, I have heard the point raised that if America walks away, it allows Russia to carry on with its invasion unhindered, pointing out that without American military aid, Ukraine would struggle to defend itself. Indeed, Zelensky himself has said how vital America is, even with Europe stepping up at long last. European leaders have said the same. After all, it will take time before they can replace America's resources. However, what I'm not seeing really addressed by these same voices is the fact that the American aid is coming to an end anyway. So even if talks did drag on for months more, that aid's going to stop. Like I said, we're not going to see Congress passing a new bill of support for Ukraine to replace the one which is due to end very, very soon. So the military aid is not attached to ongoing talks. Of course, it is possible if America ends the talks, say, in the next couple of weeks. Yes, okay, they could put a block on any remaining aid as they did earlier this year out of petulance. But that could then jeopardise the minerals and energy deal, which Trump seems genuinely desperate to agree. So could Ukraine keep that military support, that US military support, going this way? So Ukraine and the US have signed a memorandum of intent on minerals and energy. The intention appears to be to announce something a bit more concrete next Saturday, but I don't know when a final deal is expected to be reached. I seem to remember that negotiations had recently persuaded Trump to use real maths for calculating the value of the aid US has provided, from his initial estimate of $500 billion to a more believable $100 billion. Now, we don't know the details, but could the deal be looking to keep the flow of weapons going from America, not via a congressional bill, which seems completely unrealistic with Trump in charge, but paid for with this mineral and energy deal? Because the alternative is what many fear. Trump said that if one of the two parties makes it very difficult, we're just going to say, you're foolish, we're going to just take a pass. No guesses for which of the two parties Trump will decide is making it very difficult. It won't be the fascist invader. This will presumably allow Trump to decide to focus on other things, including boosting trade to compensate for his, attack on trade. This could include arguing for the removal of all sanctions against Russia, freeing up his reported commercial interests in the country. It will do nothing to shift the dial on American trade, of course, because there was so little trade even before the sanctions, but Trump himself could make money out of it. It will then mean, as some are pointing out, that both China and the USA will be supporting Russia, albeit whilst trying to claim neutrality. But nonetheless, two of the world's economic powers propping up Russia's economy. And short of military engagement with Russia, the only thing which ends the conflict is economic collapse in Russia. So any help Trump provides to Russia's economy to keep it going a bit longer is actually just prolonging the war as well, because obviously Ukraine is not going to stop defending itself, and Europe is going to do what it can to support them now. If nothing else, then for fear of an even wider conflict if Putin wins here. Germany's incoming government have said that they are prepared to supply the Taurus missiles to Ukraine in coordination with European allies. So I don't know what conditions are attached there. But that is still a big policy change from the outgoing government, although it may still depend on Merz's SPD coalition partners agreeing not to make a big issue out of it anymore. After all, Scholz initially refused to supply the missiles for fear of escalation. Surely those fears of escalation now have to take a backseat to the fears of Russian victory if America is on their side. Apart from anything else, Putin threatened escalation a lot and it never seemed to happen, did it? You know, when the circumstances change, you've got to reevaluate your own position. For example, it's been reported that the British Defence Review that we've got going at the moment is concluding that we're going to have to focus more of our efforts on European defence at the cost to other parts of the world, just because of the increased threat from Russia. Some of that is geological, by the way, not just political. The point is that facts are changing, and so your response has to adapt. And if the mineral and energy deal doesn't somehow unlock continued American support, even if it's in return for commercial interests, I don't see any wisdom in Europe holding much back when even our best efforts are not guaranteed to be enough. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.